On Monday, March 31, Zimbabwe's state, it'll be put to the test. Blessed Geza, easily the most wanted man in the country at the moment, he's called for protests. No, he didn't call for them right now. He called for them a while ago. Geza is a tricky character. He's been an ED ally for a while, but they fell out. Why they fell out, it really depends on who you ask. He's a former war veteran who, despite his status as an important figure, was dismissed when he initially tried to raise concerns within ZANU-PF. He was called a madman. That now looks like a serious oversight in hindsight. You know, for one reason or the other, Geza has an audience online. And if we follow his claims, he may have an audience offline too, if, you know, we follow what's happened with the arson attacks, with the buildings that are getting defaced in his name. So he seems to have one or two people listening to him. And I don't think, and we are told that initially both people in ZANU-PF and people who are in government on behalf of ZANU-PF, they didn't think that Geza had it in him to pull this off. And the question then is, will March 31 go ahead? And what role will the opposition parties, play in this? That's pretty much the main point of our Sunday Digest, to look at the opposition, how are they taking Geza, and will they collaborate? So we reached out to opposition figures to hear their stance, to ask them, will they support the protest on Monday? And, this whole chaos, whatever's going to happen on Monday, what role will the opposition play? Will they support it? Will they not support it? The opposition have been key figures before, in 2008, in 2016, in 2017. And to begin with, we spoke with Linda Masarira, the president of LEAD. Linda's been jailed by the government several times, pre-trial detention, for protesting, for calling on protests, and among other things, for just being a pro-democracy activist. Linda says her party, LEAD, and herself will not participate in the March 31 protests. She says she has several misgivings. We will not speak on Linda's behalf. It's an interview, but we will let you listen to Linda's submission.
Hello Zimbabweans and the Zimbabweans in the diaspora. My name is Linda Tsungerera Masarira, the president of Labour Economists and African Democrats. We are a political party that is Afrocentric, that believes in Afrocentric values, that believes in self-determination. We believe in justice, and we believe in constitutionalism. At this juncture in our lives, we are facing a whole lot of misinformation and gendered disinformation, and we are also facing a whole lot of hullabaloo, especially on social media spaces, about so-called 31 March protests, about rising up and fighting the regime, etc., etc., you name it. But when I look at the agenda of the 31 March protests, I've got a lot of questions. We've got an individual in the name of Geza, who was actually a ZANU-PF Central Committee member, who came out guns blazing at his colleagues. And as an opposition figure and a pro-democracy activist, I asked myself so many questions. What agenda is Geza really standing for, including all his allies? Because from a bird's eye view, we see a person who's trying to find his way unconstitutionally to the feeding trough. We see a bitter man who has not come to terms with his lived realities and who wants to take advantage of his own personal situation to hype up a whole population, to uprise and remove a constitutionally elected government. As a constitutionalist, I never understood the way forward after 31 March. Yes, as Zimbabweans, we faced a lot of problems. ranging from economic volatility, currency volatility, economic hardships. We've got a labor issue. We just have a myriad of challenges that Zimbabweans are facing. But at the end of the day, as calling for protests, for one's self-preservation, or for ZANU-PF political succession battles, a thing that all Zimbabweans should participate in. We've got better things to do with our time. We need to build our country. We need to find each other and unite as a people before we even start talking of the way forward. Let us not allow desperation to make us follow anything and any person who seems to be sounding like they are advancing our agenda as the opposition forces. Yes, Zimbabweans have suffered enough, but the suffering that we've been enduring for years has been caused by a lot of dynamics that we cannot even understand at times. Yes, the nation is facing a high level of corruption. That is something we have to deal with. Yes, there are inequalities. That is something that we also have to deal with. But is conflict, anarchy, and despondency the way forward? I don't think so. I've been listening to the so-called audios and videos from whoever this comrade Nyokema Bunu is trying to threaten people, coerce people into violent conduct, coerce people to beat up people and all that. That is not who we are as Zimbabwean people. We are people who are peace-loving. We are people who are nurtured to be our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. It is unfortunate that due to our circumstances, we are being taught to be animals. We are not animals. We are human beings. We need to think about our future. We need to think about our children. And for the very reasons that I have stated, I am not participating in 31 March demonstrations, and I urge all progressive Zimbabweans not to participate in 31 March protests and demonstrations. They are not organic. They do not benefit the masses. They do not benefit any poor and vulnerable Zimbabwean. This is just political contestation, a political power struggle, and a ZANU-PF internal conflict that has got nothing to do with any ordinary Zimbabwean. Usaitiswe mwana wevu, usaitiswe nekuti izvi hazvinei. When we go back into the war of liberation, to the liberation struggle, when the comrades went to war, they promised justice, they promised land, they promised equality, and a whole lot of things that they did. And people knew that if we go and participate in the liberation struggle, I'm going to get land. Even if my relatives die or my father dies, we knew that the children who were left behind would get the land. Now you're being coerced to go to the streets. For what? To benefit what? What is the end game? If you do not know the end game, why are you participating in this? We need to be clear on what we want as Zimbabweans. We need to have a shared common national vision, and that we do not have yet. We need to be able to sit down as Zimbabweans in our diversity.
We also reached out to Obey Stole, a former firebrand activist, and he's going to chop my head off for saying that. He's a former firebrand activist who was aligned with Nelson Chamisa for the longest time. He's a career opposition cadre, comrade, if that nomenclature exists in the opposition. You could say Obey is a lifelong opposition member who has been arrested several times too. When you think of Obey, you think of Makombore Raruzishe, you think of Gift Ostalos Ziva, those two. In fact, a little story. Back in my early journalism days, when I used to really, pound the pavement, as we call it, attend demonstrations, attend protests, follow opposition people around, attend the whack-a-mole games between the riot police and the opposition members. Obey was almost always with Ostalos and Marco. I almost always used to see them, together, the three of them, among other people. So, he's solid in terms of the opposition, and he has a story to him. If we were to borrow from the word Jesus, the Mchangwa likes gravitas. Yeah, Obey's got it. Anyway, right now, Obey is in Europe. He is on his way to becoming a real doctor. Yeah, no, we checked. we did. He's studying for a real degree at a real university. That's not the point of this video though. Obey's perspectives are important. So we reached out to him to ask him, what is the general perception of the conflict within ZANU-PF? You know, in the opposition circles, these guys exist in groups together, they talk to each other, they've got access to the leadership. What is the perception of pretty much the civil war in ZANU-PF at the moment? And secondly, what options does the opposition have? You know, would it be wise for the opposition to make a deal with the military to remove another leader? That's on the assumption that the military is working with Geza, like Geza claims, even though they deny it. Nonetheless, is it even a possibility that the army could do a second deal with the opposition to put a new leader? Would that kind of a deal be accepted anyway? You know, and fourthly, what about Blessed Geza as a person, about what he says, what he does within these opposition circles, right, that Obey is interacting? Do all these people consider Geza to be a viable vehicle? So let's hear from Obey.
Yeah, I think the current conflict within ZANU-PF has presented yet another opportunity for the citizens to register their displeasure against one Emmerson Mnangagwa. As you might already know, ZANU-PF over the years has brought a lot of untold suffering to the people of Zimbabwe. And ZANU-PF in its current form is represented by Emmerson Mnangagwa as the face of the party. Therefore, the current fights within the party, where Mnangagwa seemed to be the one under attack, is essentially given a lot of excitement among its people. We've always been talking about Mnangagwa as a failure. So that is the sort of the perception amongst, I would say, most of the citizens. They are excited to see that there's a voice within ZANU-PF, of course, which is talking about Mnangagwa being expected to leave office. And these are some of the sentiments that the people have already been saying, but without necessarily sort of having an opportunity to sort of express this in a manner that gives ZANU-PF a push. So now that Geza, a person within ZANU-PF, is basically saying the same thing that the citizens have been saying, in a way brings some form of excitement because people feel that they've been vindicated with regards to what they've always been saying. However, I also need to caution that even though the perception is that this is a great opportunity for Mnangagwa to go, for Mnangagwa to be pushed out of power, it does not essentially mean that the exit of Mnangagwa, if it happens, is widely expressed, as widely sort of said by Geza et al. It doesn't necessarily mean that what comes after that is an entirely changed government. Because if you remember that Geza has also been talking about the fact that he's doing what he's doing in the interest of protecting and sort of defending Chiwenga, the person. But Chiwenga, again, is a ZANU-PF player. That essentially means we are probably going to be redoing what was done in 2017, where what was only changed were the faces representing the party, but the suppression, the repression, the oppression remain the same, if not a bit worse. So yes, I would say that is the current perception now. People are happy that someone is talking about Mnangagwa being a liability, something that has already been said in the past by many people. So that feeling of having someone from within sort of confirming what people have been saying has brought a lot of excitement, I would say. And so many people have also sort of committed to be joining Geza in that fight because of their despise of one Emmerson Mnangagwa, who has constantly been a representation of all forms of failure when it comes to governance. Yeah, I think given the current developments within ZANU-PF, I find it as a great opportunity for the opposition to maximize on the potential fractures within the ruling party, to mobilize the masses and demand a stake in the governance of the country. It should not be a case of 2017 where the opposition followed a script that was designed by others somewhere else with the hope that something positive would come out of the 2017 developments. Once beaten, twice shy. I wouldn't expect the opposition to be repeating the same methods of doing things. Rather, this should be an opportunity for them to maximize on the factionalism that is rolling its ugly head within ZANU-PF, to sort of remobilize and demand some of the reforms that we've always been talking about as the opposition. To me, I think that is the only viable option available, because anything short of that, it means we are becoming also pawns within the ruling party factionalism, of which at this point I don't think it will be good for the optics to hear that opposition players have been relegated to become sort of some extensions of factions within ZANU-PF. So the opposition should remain the opposition, setting its own agenda, organizing with within its own agenda, and demand what is necessary. And in this case, we can talk about the reforms, because in any case, the idea of having an Agenda 2030 is a non-starter. Every right-thinking person should condemn Agenda 2030, should condemn this mantra of 2030 Anenga Chipo. That is pointless. That is nonsensical, for a lack of a better word. But even though we agree that it's not part of what we would embrace as a people, the idea then is to find what should be done in preparation of the future that we sort of create within our own imagination. It will be both unwise and a pity if the opposition will ever join hands with the military as a way of trying to give birth to a new Zimbabwe. I would want to take this opportunity also to go back with you to the formation of the opposition movement as we see it today. The idea then was to, of course, form an alternative that will fight against ZANU-PF with an idea of bringing change to the people of Zimbabwe and govern differently. But the steps towards this were clearly outlined, and the idea was to do this within democratic means. This is the reason why there was no, communication at some point that the opposition would choose to take up arms. That was beyond the conversation, because the do's and don'ts were stipulated from the onset. So if the opposition at this particular point get to be tempted to work with the military to remove a leader, of course it might be something that other people would be thinking of, but I think in terms of the principles as outlined from the onset, that would be a serious deviation from what has been set out. And I also do not think it will be the wisest move, in the sense that the military itself has made it clear in the past that they do not see themselves working with the opposition, because this also takes us to the narrative of polarization within the board politics of Zimbabwe. Remember that the military, when they see the civilian opposition led they see sellouts in their mind. And I don't know what kind of a compromise would have been put in place to see the opposition joining hands with the military to say we are bringing a new Zimbabwe. I am just wondering what kind of a new Zimbabwe would that be, given that it is the same military also that has stopped the same opposition that we see today from governing. 2008, Morgan Tsvangirai won an election. The military, of course, and the war veterans stopped that his governance to happen. Go back again to 2018, we saw the same military killing people on August 1. So it's really difficult for us to just forget about all those things that have happened in the past, and we cannot sacrifice that past on the altar of selfish need to be in power. I think that would be my view when it comes to the possibilities of having the opposition and the military joining hands to remove Mnangagwa. While you all agree that Mnangagwa must go, but you can also add that it's not only Mnangagwa who has to go. It's Mnangagwa, ZANU-PF, and also including the same military that is compromised at the moment. So yeah. Well, my view is that Geza is a very interesting voice at the moment. Interesting and useful at the moment. Because anything that sort of threatens the stability of ZANU-PF comes as an interesting aspect, especially given that it is the same creature called ZANU-PF which has made the people of Zimbabwe to suffer for this long. So anything that sort of shakes it, anything that sort of threatens its unity, is a welcome aspect to many people, as you have seen already. But the question as to whether Geza is a viable vehicle, I will certainly say no. He is not a viable vehicle, but of course he is a necessary voice at the moment to cause the chaos that we all need to be seeing. And the reason as to why I say he's not a viable vehicle are many. To start with, it's about us not wanting to forget the fact that Geza did not start to exist today. He is a member of ZANU-PF, or he was, I don't know. And it is the same ZANU-PF that has brought the untold suffering to the people of Zimbabwe. So that's number one. Number two, we've seen this happening before. People were given false hope in 2017 that by removing Robert Mugabe, the person, then things are going to be better. But we have all witnessed that it was a lie. Nothing better came along the way. So with that in mind, it is very difficult for us to trust the viability of him as a person. And of course, my other skepticism stems from the fact that the ZANU-PF is a cult in some sort. So we would know what will happen beyond closed doors. What if they wake up having found each other? What will happen to us if we are to think that is a viable vehicle? So, of course, I know so many people might differ with me on this one, but this is my view. I do not sort of consider him as a viable vehicle, because if the opposition is in existence, it should be able to think through solutions to bring change to the people of Zimbabwe, because that is the role of the opposition. So if we are to start considering Geza as a viable vehicle, then it's probably an admission of failure on part of the opposition, regardless of who is leading the opposition. I think we should not outsource the struggle to some individuals who also have credentials closer to what we intend to fight. Yeah, those would be my views in terms of the viability of the man himself.
So those were interesting submissions and propositions from Linda and from Obey. For us at Dug Up, when we went on the ground, we found that the state is now taking Geza seriously. It's a far cry from the initial response when Geza first spoke out. You know, he was laughed at. Yeah, he was laughed at, wasn't he? That's all changed. We understand that as a show of unity, since a lot of people are speaking about disharmony within the defense forces, with the police. As a show of unity, we will likely see a response that is different to what we saw in 2016, 2018, and 2019, which are the three most recent nationwide protests, or sort of nationwide protests. In 2016, it was mostly the police that reacted to, you know, that stairway done by Van Mawere and co. And they were overwhelmed eventually, the police that is. Protesters set fire to a ZBC truck, they looted shops, and they beat the living lights out of a number of riot police officers. They even stole their helmet. If you remember that helmet, it became an issue. The helmet and the button stick, and they said Ivan's the one who stole it. Yeah. You know, the police really, they struggled. In 2018, police were overwhelmed pretty quickly, and the situation only turned when the Rapid Reaction Unit was dispatched by the army. Unfortunately, more than half a dozen people died as a result of that. In 2019, mostly the police were deployed, and they were running battles all over the place. I think it was 2019. You know, remember those when there's a fuel hike and the fuel price hike and there were protests? Yeah. Should have been 2019, I think. Can't remember if it was 2019 or 2020, but nonetheless, you know what I'm talking about. According to the minutes from last Monday's security brief, we understand that as a show of unity, service chiefs put forward a plan of action to react in a joint format. So that means from the onset, we may likely see police being deployed alongside the army right from the start. Usually, this is how it works. The police get deployed. If they're getting overwhelmed, the Minister of Home Affairs can then ask the Minister of Defense to deploy the army, and then the Minister of Defense can do what he does with the president and so forth. But naturally, police react to policing matters unless need arises. But when we asked what would happen on Monday, we were told in plain terms that the state has a monopoly on violence and they intend to show that there's unity, and we might probably see an instance where right from the start the army is deployed right next to the police. Yeah, that's major, you know, because it takes a lot. Countries don't usually deploy the army for civilian issues, but we'll wait and see how that goes. This was discussed in the Joint Operations Command meeting, which is the President's security briefs held on Mondays. We don't know if what decision was made prior to that. The government is keeping it tight-lipped. Back to Geza. There are many perspectives surrounding his protest call and where Zimbabwe goes from here. Now, when you listen back to what Obey said, Obey rightly points out that ZANU-PF and the army have relied on the opposition to settle ZANU-PF succession battles for a while, or to help keep ZANU-PF in power. 2008, 2009, they needed the GNU. 2017, they needed the opposition to, you know, as a final nail in Mugabe's proverbial coffin, and they could need them now. Out of that, there are also questions about who Geza is and who he is working with, which is something that we understand from speaking to other opposition figures, that there is a lot of discomfort because they know that Chiwenga's people insist that Geza is not their guy. They instead say, is Kasukwere's guy. You know, that's, you, Kasukwere, that's your guy. That's what they say. We found absolutely no evidence that Geza is working with Kasukwere beyond Mchangwa saying it and people in opposition believing it. But when we speak to Chiwenga's people ourselves, they say, no, Geza's not our guy, Chiwenga is loyal to ED. Within the opposition itself, it's hard to see a marriage between Geza and the opposition as a consequence of that. The opposition doesn't have a culture of taking in new people. It's a closed shop. Geza, on the other hand, certainly has some wits about him, and we know he's got some protection as well. If Chamisa was doing what Geza is doing, Chamisa would be in jail today. I mean, the guy who attended press conferences by Geza, he's in jail, like as we speak, like right now. Blessed Mhlanga is in jail for covering Geza's press conferences. Geza is now out doing YouTube. In the time they're looking for Geza, you know, he was being spotted around town, he was going to pubs, he was going to golf courses. It didn't look like a guy was hiding. Don't know where he is now. But a lot of questions there because either they can't catch Geza or someone is protecting him. It's a weird one, and it's not just weird to us, but it's also weird to people in opposition who have got trust issues when it comes to working with people from the army. Inside opposition circles, there are some people who think Geza is a good hammer, a tool that can be used to move the necessary blocks. You know, you don't buy a hammer because it looks cute. You buy a hammer because that hammer can do a job, and people say Geza can do a job. But guess what? People did say ED could do a job in 2017, and a number of those people aren't happy. They're not happy today. They aren't happy at all. They're not happy. They're absolutely upset. So yeah, you know, it's a bit of an issue there, isn't it? As for tomorrow, time will tell. We have a lot of questions ourselves. What kind of response will we see from the government? Will we see the state react and respond with the kind of force that we saw in Kenya, for instance, or that we saw in 2018 or in 2019, 2020, whichever one that was? Or will the police lose that game of cat and mouse, you know? And you also wonder, will the people even heed the calls to flood the streets and to protest? Look, in 2016, people did follow the calls, although they did the opposite. Ivan said stay away, people went in the streets instead. But that one was different because it wasn't just about Ivan. At the same time, the civil service was protesting, or they also wanted to stay away in the same period. And the civil service is the biggest employer in the country. You also had a lot of other different associations, you know, involved, like the vendors, the cross-borders. They wanted no part. They wanted a part of that protest. We don't get any indication that it's going to be the same this time. And also, we know for certain that the police deployment and readiness has been spread to all corners of the country. So there's no village, growth point, town, city where police are not in a state of readiness. And that's because this protest was announced. So that gave the government time to thwart it, right? Unlike the 2018 and 2019 ones, which were somewhat spontaneous. 2018, people were frustrated about the delay in election results. 2016, it was, you know, this flag, you know, that was spontaneous. It just happened around Independence time. 2019, there's a fuel price hike. Those were all spontaneous. The government didn't have time. You could say to some degree they were caught unaware. We've already shown you that Zimbabwe's intelligence is all about ghost reports, you know, fake stuff and lies. So it's not surprising that they were caught out that time. Right now, they've known for a while because Geza put them on notice, which means they've prepared an apt response, they've done drills, and they won't be caught unaware. But the question is, will we see a responsible response, or will we see irresponsible gun toting? I suppose time will tell. That's the last thing we can say. We can't predict. We've done a digest with you. The Sunday digest was always going to be about what we ate already, not what's going to happen in future. We can't fortune tell. We know you guys want different kinds of content, but we can't fortune tell. We can only look at something in the past or look at something which is contemporaneous, and then, you know, run it through a couple of sources, use our networks, use our relationships, and give you answers. Yikes. Thank you again for tuning in. Please like, please share, please comment, whether you're saying something positive or something mean, but comment. It helps us out a lot. And if you can, tell somebody, you know, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell a mate about what's happening at Dug Up. And cheers guys, and see you tomorrow. Definitely after the protest, we'll be here, so we'll see you tomorrow. We might even do a live stream. Nonetheless, cheers guys, gotta go, and see you soon. Yeah. And you also wonder, will